Thank you, Father, for this day. Um, I'd ask that you just let there be a spirit of peace that rests in this place, and allow your truth and grace to reign, and allow to guide my words, and to open the eyes and ears of the people that have chosen to hear your word, and to allow that word to grow within them, to give them a very specific plan and purpose for the people. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so God of government. So everything that we're learning over the next, we'll say the first session, right, first 4 weeks, is designed to give a very clear picture on how God has established government. Okay, you're going to find we're going to go. And it was funny because I know it's a government class, and we will touch on, the structure and nuances and how the government works today. But to understand that, you've got to understand the framers of the Constitution and the founding fathers of the Declaration of Independence. The problem is we don't understand what their intent is, and because of that, we've allowed our system and the people that we place in leadership to take us off course. And now what we've kind of done is we're so far off course, the only way to kind of get back sometimes is through the judicial system. And that was never the intent of the Founding Fathers. The intent of the Founding Fathers is each and every one of us, as citizens of the United States, to be actively involved, to be aware, and to know everything, to know the beginnings or the genesis of our country. And if we know that, then when things come up, it's easy for us to identify, say, hey, no, that's wrong. That's not in alignment of what's going on. And, there's checks and balances to keep things in place. And so, Wendy's still putting that stuff together, but I'll just kind of, I'll read from, this is a quote from Clarence Thomas, U.S. Supreme Justice. It says, as I have traveled across the country, I have been astounded at just how many of our fellow citizens feel strongly about their constitutional rights, but have no idea what they are, or for that matter, what the Constitution says. I'm not suggesting that they become constitutional scholars, whatever that means. I am suggesting, however, that if one feels strongly about his or her rights, it does make sense for them to know generally what the Constitution says about them. It is at least as easy to understand a cell phone contract, and vastly more important. And so, there is, I think we all feel it, especially members of this church, that there is an awakening taking place. We know something's wrong, but we don't know exactly how to deal with it. And you're right. There is something wrong. But in order for us to fix what is wrong, we have to go back to the roots. We have to go back to understanding who we are, how do we get to this place, what we come from. And if we do that, it'll be relatively easy. Believe it or not, as far gone as, Pastor's right. We're this close. We're this close away from losing it all. We really are. But even with that being said, we're this close from gaining it all. That's what makes this country, the system that we operate in, that we're supposed to operate in, so great. Is because as far as we are away, we're that close to being right on. And it just takes people willing to look back, to look at themselves in the mirror, and to take a self-accountability. And we'll hit on this as the section go on. So this section 1, is really just an introduction to the 4-week class, but it's really to identify one critical thing in each and one of us is our purpose. Our purpose. If we figure that out, it makes everything else get in alignment. Okay, so there's some things. So, okay, more than ever, we the people are hungry for the knowledge and truth. We're searching out the formula of our freedom, seeking the principles that somehow made America the most powerful nation in the world. We're digging deep and refusing to accept shallow answers and demanding we return to our roots. The founding principles of our freedom formula is in plain language, and therefore restoration simply requires us to read them and to stand up for them. Okay? So, Wendy, if can you have some of those? You don't have to staple them. You can just start handing them out. So so number 1 is it is important for us to spend time in the past because history shows us the formula, that's number 1, has made us the most powerful nation up to this point. And what is that formula? The formula is freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom to petition, freedom of religion, free enterprise, right? The freedom is the secret sauce. It opens everything up. Think about it. When you're oppressed, when you're burdened by war, taxes, rules, tyranny, at the time they were dealing with a king, right? Oppression. When you're dealing with these things, it inhibits, it stifles. The creativity is gone. And the greatest thing about our country is because is this thing called freedom. When we're free to invent, to express, to worship, then everything else opens up. And so, someone has something? Oh, no. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, here. I'm going to give you the mic, and as people have questions, please pass it on.
As you were talking, I remembered an article that I read, and I think it was last night on the Fox News website. It was about a prominent political figure in America, a very influential figure, saying that we need to rein in freedom of speech. If we don't, we're going to lose control. That was Hillary Clinton said that, and she means it.
Yes.
It's just, so that's how they think. They have to control our rights so that they can do what they want to do.
That's right. Understand this, that the forces that are there right now don't want. Okay, listen. Who in here with the show hands, real quick? Who has read the Constitution? Excellent. Okay. So that's about half. And let me tell you something. That's about right statistically. Statistically, as a country, It's about half. Half the people have read the Constitution. How many have read the Declaration of Independence? It's about half. Okay? We had some more people come in, and it's still saying about there. Okay? Who in here has read the Federalist Papers? It's about right. Okay? The Federalist Papers were the papers that were written to kind of prime the people for the Declaration of Independence, for establishing our country, establishing our government, right? They're the prelude, okay? But to understand the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, you had to have read or been a part of the Federalist Papers. It brings it all together, okay? The reason why, it's simple. If you want to change the way things are, you have to stop teaching people the way it is. Okay? And so it's a systematic approach to not teaching the about the history of the Federalist Papers, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. But it's not just that. It's the people that we're doing. Remember, it's the intent. We learn that all, the context, right? We'll take a step back in biblical terms, right? If anyone in here was part of the false doctrines, what did Valentine constantly say over and over and over again? The context, the context, the context. You have to look at it in the context in which something is written. What was the author and the Spirit of God communicating to us in the context of the passage? And if you understood that, the passage makes sense. Well, if we don't understand the thought of the men who were putting these things in place, we don't understand it. We can read the Constitution, and it's good. We should do that. We should read the Declaration of Independence. We should read the Federalist Papers. These are all things that we should be a part of, but you also have to understand the intent in which that those documents were written. Because if you understand that, you can't change it. But because we don't do that, the study of those documents is as important or is it just as important to understand the men who wrote those and their intent of those documents. That's just as important, if not more important, because then someone can't come along and say, well, this is what they meant. No, it's not what they meant, because this is what their intent was. You can't change the intent. And we'll hit on this as we go further. So, number 2, George Mason said this. He said, no free government, nor the blessing of liberty can be preserved by any people, but by frequent recurrence. Frequent recurrence. We talked about this before. Okay. I know we got a good mix of men and women here, but who's played baseball or football? Any type of sports, okay? Is every season, right? In the beginning, before the season starts, what do? You train. And a lot of times, what does the training involve? Stamina, endurance, fundamentals. Why are fundamentals important in whatever sport you play? They're foundational, right? Muscle memory. Right. What happens if you skip that part? Right? Anyone else? Injuries? You're not as effective, right? Right. And so here it is. There has to be a constant recurrence, a frequent recurrence. Every year you have to go back. You have You have to go back and learn something. You build on the foundational stuff that you've already understood. You can go back and read quotes from, instead of George Mason, you can go back to, Thomas Jefferson, to Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, right? Alexander Hamilton, John Hancock. You start to look at those individuals a little bit differently. What was their intent? Not just that they signed a document and they moved on, but what did they believe? And what you will find in all those guys, I'll give you another example. Of all the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, who do you think of first? What is that? Alexander Hamilton. Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin, right? Why do you think those guys are typically the first ones you think of? Those are the ones that people teach you about. And why, if you know, that's great. Why do you think those are the ones they really point out? Microphone? Anyone? This is important. Because those men were the least religious of all of them. You can't talk about the people who were religious or who had great influence in the creation of documents that founded our country. Why? Well, because that puts God first. And the vast majority of the men were religious. They believed in God. Now, we'll hit on this. Benjamin Franklin, there was times where like I said, him and Thomas Jefferson, they were the least religious of all of them, the least. But even them, at times, may point to give reference to God in prayer, right? Just like they say, in a foxhole in war, there's no atheists in war. Because in that moment, you're praying to somebody to hear you, to get you out of that situation. Well, think about it. These men experienced that. They were in the middle of that. It was about survival. The average life expectancy of that time was what? Anyone know? Close. Closer. 33. 33 years old was the average life expectancy at the time of 1776. People died all the time. You know what the average number of children at that time was? No, like of kids. For some people, yeah. For some people, maybe. It was like 7.5 children. Average. But they had to, because they were all dying. You had to do it. And so these people, and we'll hit on this throughout the process on their beliefs, their vision for the country. But I want to set that up for you so you understand where we're going. So number 3, it's important not only to defend the Constitution, but also assert our constitutional rights. We do not win by being on a defense. We win by being on offense. Okay? So it's our responsibility not just to protect, right, the things that we find sacred in the Constitution, but it's our responsibility to assert. What do I mean by assert? I want to make sure everyone understands. Assert. Insist. That's a polite way of saying it. Anyone else? Demand, that's better. Fight. You didn't say that? What'd you say? Implement. That's a nice way. Affirm. It's good. Assert means force. By force. We're not asking. Let me tell you something. For the parents in here, if someone comes after your child, are you gonna ask them not to, or are you gonna protect that child? You're gonna fight for that child. Yeah, forcefully, right? There's no question. Your approach when it comes to your rights that are given to us by way of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, we forcefully protect those things. It's not an option. And because we don't have that mindset, that mentality, we freely give it up. And the people in power are more than happy to take it away from you. Again, it goes back to ignorance. If we don't study this, we don't read it, we don't study it, we don't have a knowledge of it, then we can't defend it. We certainly can't fight for it. And we can't hold people accountable when they cross the line. So they keep us in the dark, they keep us in ignorance, and whatever they do, we just kind of go along. Until now, until recently, people are waking up because they realize how far, of course, we've gotten. But because we don't understand it. Okay. Number 4, the Constitution still works today, even 2 centuries later, because it is based on timeless principles of jurisdiction that govern human behavior. This is curious. Okay, so timeless principles. This is a little. Who can think of a document that's a timeless principle in the Bible? Think of, what's that? Boom. This is my favorite student up here. Yeah, my teacher's pet. The 10 Commandments is a timeless, hey, I love it. All right. The 10 Commandments is a timeless document. Why? Because it's foundational. Our law system is based on those tablets that were written by the hand of God on Mount Sinai. And up until, the 1960s, they were sitting in every single courthouse. Why? Because it was a cornerstone to our judicial system. Now, that got repealed and they're coming back. But for all those years, we went with people saying that doesn't belong there because it's God. It's too religious. A principle is a principle. A principle is a principle. It stands the test of time, right? To love God, to not harm, don't lie, be obedient, serve your parents. It doesn't matter what community, what demographic, what religion, not religion, but one ethnic group you come from, what part of the country, it works no matter where you go. That's how it stands the test of time. When people say, well, that document is over 200 years old, we've evolved since then. We're a different society. We can come up with our own ways that are outside God's. And really, that's what it comes down to. You think they're telling you it was because of a bunch of old white guys that were slave owners and they're out of touch. Today is a different world. No. These people, and we'll get into it, these people were not out of touch. They were farmers. They were teachers. I think there were only like above the 56 that were signed at Declaration of Independence. I want to say there was 11 that had college education. But these are everyday people. They were everyday people that were oppressed and that seeked the counsel of God in establishing the framework that we see today. Okay, so number 5. Sorry, I kind of lost my place there. So the founding fathers believed in the lack of patriotism was selfish. This next section is pretty cool. So patriotism is as much a virtue, a justice, as it is necessary to support the societies as natural affection is for support of families. Amor patriae, the love of country, is both a moral and religious duty. A moral and religious duty. It comprehends not only the love of our neighbors, but of millions of fellow creatures, not only present, but for future generations. And so, well, here, I'm just going to hit on this and we'll kind of talk about it real quick. So, that was Benjamin Rush that made that quote. So, this is what Benjamin Rush taught, that public schools had 3 primary purposes. These were the pillars in establishing, so up until then, each state, as we see it today, was its own country. They were literally countries, okay? And then there was a formation, the United States, and so now they went from kind of country status to state status, operating as one within a union, okay? And so what each country had its own way of teaching their people, which is fine, okay? We kind of see that today, but it's more uniform. Okay, so, but Benjamin Rush is like, no, what we need to do is now that we're one country, we're united under this banner of freedom, we need to teach 3 primary pillars or principles in our school system. And tell me if you see this today. So A is teach students to love and serve God in public school. B, teach students to love and serve their country. And C, teach students to love and serve their families. God, country, families. Does anyone think that's a little bit odd in the order? Who would say maybe family should come second? Is that normal? That's a normal response, right? And you can even say, like, it's kind of the Hispanic cultures that, and that's part of the reason why you're starting to see the Hispanic people turning away from some of the leftist viewpoints. Maybe they had been a Democrat before, but because there's been more of an attack on the family, you're seeing a kind of a jerking away. And that is one of the greater virtues of a Hispanic community, is because they do put family very high on that list, okay? But it's like an isolationist viewpoint. They've kind of like, well, I know this neighborhood is horrible, but me and my family, I'm going to protect that. Well, Benjamin Rush, they believe, and many people like him, believe that if you truly care about your family, you have to care about the country first. And this is the reason why. Dr. Rush put country before family because he understood that if we ever lost control of our country, it would become the great enemy of families. Where are we at today? We have lost control of our country, and because of that, they're the great enemy of our families. The number one goal of all Marxists, is you have to destroy the family unit. Because the only thing that matters in a Marxist society is government. No family. Family has to be broken. And however way they go about it, today you see the transgender movement. That's big. You know, just in general, the stripping away of rights, parental rights, in what their child learns in school. That's one of the primary reasons why we created the academy here. For those who live in Dallas County, in this particular school district, because of that. Because you don't have the control of what your child is learning. And if they decide to do something without your knowledge, more and more every day, that's being kept from you. Why? Because we have lost control and they've become the great enemy to our families. Because we didn't, remember, this primary thing of today is, think about it, your purpose. What is your purpose? Right? You put God first, you put your country first, and your family next. You do those three basic things, everything else will be in alignment. God is a God of order. He's a God of structure. He's at the head. It goes down from there. But what our government has done today is remove God from every aspect of our lives. And let me tell you something. Whenever you make a decision, no matter what it is, but in this particular case, we're talking about God, okay? But whatever decision you make, 99.9% of the time, it never happens in a vacuum. That decision has consequences that affect you, people around you, people within your community. And we're talking about maybe some not so big decisions, but we're talking about God. When you remove God from the place of authority and establishing our freedom and our rights in this country, there's a vacuum. It doesn't have a vacuum. In that place, the government gets put in that place. Why do you think we go to the government for every problem that we have? Because they've done it on purpose. Okay. So this next section, I'm talking about the Declaration of Independence. What time is it? Okay. Okay, so the signers of the Declaration of Independence, every one of them, most of the signers of the Declaration of Independence signed a document on August the 2nd, 1776. And when they signed it, many of them believed it was their death warrant. So August 2nd, 1776, the second part of that is death warrant. So on John Hancock and Fuller was there when they initially when they signed the document, okay, on July 4th, 1776. But they had to wait, just like everything else. It took time to get all these people together. Once they got them together, they signed it. Most of them signed the rest of the document. Now, we've seen journals, because everything that was taking place, they were taking journals. And they said that when you want to talk about standing up for something and being held accountable for it, when they were signing a document, they said it was so quiet. The only thing they heard was the footsteps walking up when each representative from the representative states were being called to sign the document. Between the footsteps, the breathing, and the scratching of their signature on the document. That's how quiet it was. That's how they knew what they were doing. They weren't just going to sign something and go back home and then going back to the way things were. No. They knew it was game on. And so they're kind of calling up people one by one. And there's a guy named Albridge Jerry. And he called him. And he's a small man in stature, very thin, small. and he goes walking up there. He's getting ready to sign, and then from the very back, you had like this colonel. What was his name? Colonel Benjamin Harrison. Colonel Benjamin Harrison. Now he happened to be of course, the largest man. He was tall, big guy, boisterous voice. And from the very back, he was from Virginia, and he was like, man, I'm glad. I said, as he's walking up to me, he goes, hey, Jerry, too bad you're so light in stature. When you get strung up, you're going to be dancing around on the gallows for a good 15, 20 minutes. I'm so big, it's only take me about a minute or two before I'm dead. And that was the only thing that was said during that time. But afterwards, Benjamin Franklin later said, he was like, whether we should be all hung together, better than we get hung separately. At least we would do it together. But they all understood. Think about it. If you were fighting for independence, you were fighting for freedom, you're fighting for rights, you're fighting to be able to live the life that you want to live under God. And you're put in that situation. Do you realize these people? These are just some basic notes here. So the cost. I think Pastor Terry talked about whenever you follow Christ or you become a child of Christ, he said to count the cost. These men knew what the cost was. This is out of the 56 signers of that day, 44 of them paid the price. 7 of them lost their lives. 2 lost their health. 5 of them were prisoners of war. 13 of them lost their estates and all their fortune. 5 of them incurred heavy debt they never recovered from. 4 of them lost their children, all their children. 4 of them lost their wives. This is about 50 right in here. Imagine 44 of you right here. Only 12 of you didn't pay that. That's how serious it was. Remember our purpose. What was their purpose? Why they do the things that they did? Okay, so after that, so they're General Washington is kind of fighting. He's going against the Britain army. They've already taken Long Island at this point, and he's hunkered down in Manhattan, in New York. And the problem that Washington has at this point, many of them, but one of the things is he doesn't have intelligence. He doesn't have intel. He needs to know what the British army is doing. And so he gets with all of his colonels, his officers, and he's like, I need a spy, and I can't rely on the traditional spy. The traditional spy was not part of any type of military, okay? These were mercenary people. Spies were considered lowest of the low, okay? They were not virtuous men. You paid them enough money, they'll do whatever you want, okay? They were not trusted by anybody. And remember, this time, honor was different back then. What you did affected your legacy. And so what Washington said, look, I can't trust these guys. I need someone to step up and do the unthinkable. I need one of our men to go as a spy. Everyone's walking away. They're like, okay, it's a tall order. We'll see if we can find somebody. So all the officers leave and they break and they meet with their men individually. And long story short, you had one man by the name of Nathan Hale. Anyone know who has heard of Nathan Hale before? Awesome. What can you tell me about Nathan Hale? Who was he?
Oh gosh, my brain's going all Um, well,
I'll give you a hint.
okay.
A speech. One life.
Speech. I'm sorry, my brain's going.
It's okay, it's okay.
I
What-
do remember him from my history class.
He's a very, for not being a framer of the Constitution, he had a very, very small role in in the course of our country. He basically he's a captain. At the time, he was 21 years old, okay? He actually got to the meeting late. He was ill. And no one in any of the officers could talk any of their men because they had to volunteer to do this, to be the spy. Nobody. And so as they were getting ready to break and all the officers were getting ready to go back to report to Washington and give them the bad news, Nathan Hill comes in at the last minute. He's sick. He had the flu. And he says, I'll do it. And even on the way out there, one of his friends, now this guy was an educated man. He was a teacher before the war. He studied in Yale in the ministry. Okay? And his friend, who was also an officer, who went to school with him at Yale, tried to talk him out of it and say, look, you're going to dishonor yourself. Your legacy will be ruined. You'll be a spy. And he says, no, not only that, you're not even cut out for it. You're a horrible liar. You're a man of integrity. And even if you do that, you're not going to make it back because it's too hard. That's not what you're cut out for. And he's like, I'm going to do it. So he goes and does it. He poses as, you know what made him effective initially as a spy? Because he went as a teacher. Because he used to be a teacher. And so under that guise, it wasn't hard for him to be deceptive, if you will. And so he goes and he takes notes. He's counting troop movements. He's base of operations. You know, he's got all the goods. He writes it on a piece of paper. He hides it in his shoe. Tries to get back across, and he gets caught. Without trial, they decide they're going to hang him the very next day. And all night, you know, he asked for a Bible. They said, no Bible. He asked for a clergyman. He said, no clergyman. He says, can I send for family? No. And so he had, now remember, as an educated man, he was there with his thoughts. And he began to write. So the next day, when they're walking him out to hang him, to execute him, you know, he's being mocked by the soldiers, the officers of the British Army. And he says, it's the one life phrase, which I think I have it right here. Oh, the only regret that I have is but one life to lose for my country. That's the only regret that I have. Not the fact that I've dishonored myself or my country. I failed my general. I failed my people. I disgraced myself by being a spy. It wasn't any of that. He didn't beg for his life. One of the British soldiers made note that he had a very calm spirit about him. Fearless. And that exemplifies what the men were going through at that time, but also the direction our country was going to go towards to lead us to prosperity, to success that this world had never seen before. Why? Because we weren't looking to kings, rulers for our happiness. We were looking to God. So that the answer to number 11 is, at the age of 21, Captain Nathan Hale was captured after volunteering for a recon mission, just before he was hung, he gave the passionate speech, Freedom, and closed with his famous, I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. This statement has inspired generations to sacrifice for freedom. John 15:13, no greater love has any man that he may lay down his life for his friends. I like this. So, I've got 5 minutes. I'm going to run through this real quick. The best way to honor those who give one life for our freedom is to earn the freedom they sacrificed for their lives. That's Captain Miller from Saving Private Ryan. So Captain Miller was a movie, Saving Private Ryan, right? They were charged with going and rescuing one man. His other brothers had died in action. It was actually based off kind of the true real life events of the Sullivan brothers. And so, but along the way, each of them starts to die. And at the end, the captain dies. And, of course, the guy they're saving, Private Ryan, he tells them, earn it. Earn the freedom. Earning in the freedom doesn't mean just making a lot of money, having lots of kids, and being happy. Earn the freedom means you put in what was given to you, my blood for you. You sacrifice, you push, you protect, you defend, and you assert your rights within the Constitution. Abraham Lincoln said that we should take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the full last measure of devotion. The full last measure is the sacrifice of one's life, those who've died, the full last measure. Right here, this is the most important part of this whole session. The fate of the world depends on you. Your name goes there. Think about it. What country has the most influence on every part of the other world? All the other countries. United States. If we know that, then we also have to understand we, the people, govern ourselves and elect representatives to represent our morals and our ideas. It's up to us. The fate of the world does depend on us. But we've been taught to believe that's not the case. Your actions do affect, remember, like I said, your actions your choices are not in a vacuum. They do affect the rest of the world. All of us can help prepare the next generation by getting our local school district to participate in. This is Celebrate Freedom Week. Has anyone heard about Celebrate Freedom Week? Okay, so this is a Texas bill, 1776. And what it states is it's actual law. I don't know, everyone knows this. In the state of Texas, there's a law that the school districts are supposed to teach you about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the framers, the founding fathers, and the framers of the Constitution. But unless we are active on the local school boards and force the administration to implement this, it doesn't happen. Or if they do teach it, they teach their version of it. They're white, old men, slave owners out of touch, and we need to erase that. Okay? It's time for us to heed the challenge for every Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Jay. Okay, now this is the first Supreme Court Justice, John Jay. And this is I've kind of hit it on, but I'm going to hit it again. Every member of the state ought to diligently read and to study the Constitution for his country and to teach the rising generations to be free. Freedom isn't just going to happen on its own. It has to be taught. It has to be explained. You have to understand that freedom didn't come to you freely, there was a price. Just like it was a price for our salvation, there's a price to be free within the United States. There's always a price. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they're violated. So when you know your rights, then you understand when they're violated. But if you don't know your rights, then you have no idea when it's taking place. They'll be better prepared to defend and assert them, right? So there's a 6-part process. You have to read the Constitution. You have to study the Constitution. You have to know the Constitution, right? Because when you understand it, you perceive it, then you can defend it and assert it, if need be, right? And that assertion by force, remember, by force. They're not just going to give it to you. This is not an exhaustive study. This class is a crash course class, okay? Think of it as a quick reference guide. Anyone that has, if you ever bought a car or a computer or a phone, you know how like you got the manual that's like this thick, no one ever reads it because it's too much? This class is not going to be that. This class is the reference guide, right? The one that's like 5 pages. It teaches you how to turn it on, to access basic things, and to use it. That's basically it. Reset the clock on their car, right? The stuff that you need quickly, right? That's really all you need. You don't have to be a scholar. You just have to know it. You just have to understand what your rights are. So if you want to go in depth and understand more, I've listed some resources here that you can go into depth. But right now, this class is primarily teaching you about the men, the intent, the context in which it was written. If you understand that, it puts everything else into context. Okay. All right, so I ran out of time. Again, we kind of started a little bit late. I have to finish right now. If you have any questions, I can't really get into them because I promised 9:55 and it's 9:57. So if you have any questions, I did tell people early on that if you have any questions, concerns, ideas, I'll be in a situation room for about 15 minutes and I can address those. I just want to thank every one of you for showing up today. And again, I didn't quite finish it. Next time I'll do better in my time and get all the way through it. But most of it, I hit on it. A lot of it was quotes. Please read these, and that will help you understand the next section, which will be the seeds of liberty. Okay? All right. Thank you, Father. I ask that you just bless all the men and women that have chosen to come to this place. Allow them to walk in your truth and your glory. I'd ask you to protect them in everything they do. In Jesus' name, amen.